Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delaila Lugo.
And I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
And today, Delaila, what are we talking about?
God of War.
Dun,
Bob,
dun,
Bob, Bob,
dun.
Bob, Bob. Jason, what the fuck are you? What are you
The
humming?
music is so
That's
good.
the original one.
Oh,
That's
Yeah, when you first fired it up on the PS2.
in the very first one.
I wasn't cluing into what you were doing, and I was just like, going with what I was. Okay, whatever.
Whoever's listening to this in the future is going to hear like two dissonant soundtracks.
If we didn't
Both
lose,
good.
if we didn't lose you right there, thank you. This is a podcast. It's Spoilercast. What we do is we play a game and we record on it for like 2-3 hours. Sorry for how long these things tend to run. But yeah, we record on it, talk about the story, talk about the gameplay, talk pretty much everything. We spoil the hell out of this game. So if you haven't played God of War, and to be clear, we're playing God of War 2018, not God of War 2005, two completely separate games. They are not even remake. 2018 is not a remake of 2005. They're totally separate games. You could even look at God of War 2018 as God of War 4. So if you have not played,
However, I would recommend playing that trilogy before playing this
Hell
game.
yeah.
I'm getting there. So if you
Including
haven't
the
played,
spin-offs.
if you haven't played God of War 2018, go play that before you listen to it. And also, yes, if you're feeling ambitious, and we all do recommend it, go play at the very least the original trilogy of God of War, because they're really good games.
And it's all collected now.
On PS3.
On PS3, yeah.
The only one easily playable on PS4 is God of War 3. You can play God of War 1 and 2 through PS Now, but I wouldn't necessarily call that easy.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of extenuating factors there between cost
I would
and
say
internet.
it's worth it if you've never played them before, though.
No, 100%. Like, go play those games if you haven't, and because they're very good games, and they are important. This being God of War 4, quote unquote, like, they're very important to understanding fully who the character of Kratos is and how he got here and his progression as a character throughout this entire saga. Delaila said, "Yeah, play the whole saga if you can."
Chains of Olympus.
You'll get more out of the story of this game if you understand, particularly the first game. I would say.
Yeah, the first game.
All three help, but the first game I feel like
It explains why he's on the fucking rampage.
I would say 1 and 3 are probably the most important, which is a shame because I think my favorite is 2.
Huh.
I really love God of War.
I could see that. Yeah.
But we're beating around the bush here. So, yeah, if you haven't played God of War 2018, go play it before you listen to this episode. And if you can, play the original trilogy at the very least. Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta, like, they're good, but they're not. They are side stories. They are side games. They give you a little more context behind things, but I wouldn't call them required playing. But if you like God of War, please, by all means. I love how none of us brought up Ascension.
Oh, God, yeah.
I haven't even, to be honest, that's like the only God of War game I haven't played. I have not played Ascension.
It's the worst one.
Yeah.
I've only played the trilogy. I've never played any of the handheld.
All right. Well, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's we'd better get started with a history lesson.
Yeah.
On God of War 2018. What do you think, Jason?
Let's do it.
I know Delilah's all on board. All right. So, history of God of War 2018. Ascension, we just talked about it. Ascension released in 2013, I think earlier in the year. And it was unfortunately, like, the game was well received, and I believe it sold well, but Sony Santa Monica suffered some layoffs after that game shipped. And as they started putting together their prototypes and concepts and whatever, they entered pre-production for the next God of War game in late 2014. We also found out that there was a canceled, different, unrelated project from them, which was kind of a contingency of those layoffs, that whatever additional game they were working on got canceled. But Corey Barlog, I almost keep wanting to say Balrog. I think that's a common
The Balrog,
issue people
a
run
demon
into.
of the ancient world. His foe is beyond any of you. Run!
But
It's Gandalf, by the way.
Corey Barlog, previously he was I think the art director for God of War 1. He was the game director for God of War 2, and I believe he worked on God of War 3 in some capacity. But he's a longtime alum with this franchise and with Sony Santa Monica. He was brought on to direct God of War 3. Or I'm sorry, the new God of War. He was brought on to direct the new God of War. Early on, they were trying to work out as spoilers for God of War 3 already, like we're gonna start spitting spoilers. It's kind of important that you go and play those games, to be honest. The end of God of War 3 sees Kratos mortally wounded, and after the credits you see that a blood trail, and he has crawled away from the completely obliterated land of Greece. So seemingly you could make the assumption that he left Greece. So they worked to figure out where this new one was going to take place, and heavily considered at the beginning was Egyptian mythology, which I thought was really interesting.
I see. I hated that. I always, as soon as like rumors were abound, I'd always hoped they would go to Norse, just because I felt Egyptian was too close to Greek.
That's a fair reason, and ultimately you got your wish. In discussing Egyptian mythology as a setting, they felt that it being much more civilized, not civilized in the sense that it's more civil, I guess, in the sense that there's more people. There's more of a civilization there.
Yes. In Norse, it's the Middle Ages. It's the dark times.
Right. So they wanted to keep the story focused on Kratos, on a single character. So that led them to move to Norse mythology, where it was a little more isolated, or really a lot more isolated than Egyptian mythology was. We got leaked concept art in April 2016 showing this Norse setting, and 2 months later at E3 2016 we got that epic as hell press conference.
One of the best.
Yeah,
not the best.
I would say the best press conference Sony's ever put on. Where not just the God of War reveal, but pretty much the entire show was given and presented to a live orchestra.
God of War was the first announcement.
Yes, God of War.
And it was particularly awesome that shows, because this game, just before I say anything else, fucking fantastic soundtrack.
Yes.
The Bear McCreary, the composer.
I listen to it all the time. It's on Spotify if you have it.
I have it on vinyl.
Hey.
Yeah, Bear McCreary, he conducted the orchestra for the God of War reveal, and it was great because it was just this epic booming music with like new themes and stuff, and nobody really had that idea of what it was, short of that concept art leak earlier in the year. But then after the big booming music ends and the curtains open and you see that Sony Interactive Entertainment presents.
It was kind of in the back of your mind, and then it went to Kratos kneeling. It's almost like you knew but you didn't.
And it was such a cool reveal because it was Atreus playing outside, and you just hear boy.
Yeah.
And different voice actor too. So you don't have that. I think his name was Terrence Carson. You don't have that recognized voice. You have Christopher Judge now coming in and playing the character, and Atreus goes in and Kratos steps out from the shadows. And I was in PlayStation used to do this whole movie theater thing.
Oh yeah, you were there.
I used to go to those. I missed that so much. I loved going to those. I was in the movie theater and it erupted.
Hell yeah!
It was one of the best moments of E3 period for Sony's E3
for sure
history. Like it was awesome. It was so cool. And at the time, I
Not,
wasn't really even into
not
the
as good as
franchise.
Flute Man, but
At the time, I wasn't really even into God of War, but I felt that energy, and that was so revitalizing.
Kratos was always my favorite of all the Sony-owned characters. Kratos was always my favorite, so
Well,
I have a special bond with Kratos.
Jason got that. Jason got that treat right there. But yeah, we got that reveal E3 2016. The game. I found this out by watching, and I'm gonna plug this right now. If you guys haven't, and if anyone else hasn't, if you're interested in, if you liked this game and you're interested in games development and the process in general, and just like hearing some, background to the history and everything, go watch Raising Kratos. It is a free documentary that PlayStation put out, detailing the development of this game. I watched it for the second time today, right before this recording, just because I hadn't seen it in a while. It's very, very good. It's very, very interesting. I found out that this wasn't publicly announced, but they were originally planning for a release date of March 13th, which actually has some history with God of War. I believe God of War 2 and God of War Ascension were both released on March 13th.
Yeah.
In their respective years. So this game was planned to release that day. It wound up getting delayed internally, and the only release date we ever knew, which was the day it came out, was April 20th, 2018.
420.
420. So that game came out on that day.
The memes were glorious for this game.
Yeah. Game came out that day, and as we all know, widespread critical acclaim, 10 out of 10s down the board. We got that really heartfelt video from Corey Barlog. He recorded his live reaction to him going to look at the Metacritic score and seeing the reviews the game was getting without having seen anything, and he broke down crying.
Well deserved.
Yeah. And later that year, the Game Awards 2018, guess what got Game of the Year?
Hey.
I want to say something about those Game Awards. I was prepared during that whole thing. That was like the last Game Awards I really watched the entire thing. During that whole thing, because up until that final award for Game of the Year, Red Dead, which came out the same year, was wiping it. And I was getting fucking furious. Because if you don't know me, I fucking hated Red Dead 2. I loved Red Dead. I fucking loved Red Dead 1. I thought they fucked up Red Dead 2. But that's a story for another time. Anywho, I especially got angry when Red Dead 2 won Best Original Score over God of War 2. I was livid. I was like, yo, fucking
in
Kevin...
in case you couldn't tell.
Whatever
Jeff
his
Keighley?
name is. Jeff Keighley, not Kevin Keighley.
Well,
Jeff Keighley.
Something to note real quick
I'm
about the
gonna
Game
come
Awards.
beat the shit out of you.
Something to note about the Game Awards: Jeff Keighley does not vote. He has nothing to do with what wins.
It doesn't matter. He's the face. It doesn't matter. But then it won Game of the Year, and I jumped up and I was like, "Fucking suck it, Rockstar."
If you want to hear more about how much Jason's opinions, I guess, on Rockstar games, go listen to our special bonus episode, favorite games of the 2010s.
Oh yeah.
Jason laid out some heat about Grand Theft Auto 5 in that.
Did I? I don't remember.
Yeah, you probably blacked out while you were bitching about it.
I don't remember. I'm like ambivalent about it. I don't like it nearly as much as any of the other Grand Theft Autos. But anywho, we're getting sidetracked. Basically, I was very happy that it won Game of the Year. I was not as happy that it didn't win soundtrack because, as I said before, this game has one of the best game soundtracks ever.
Yes. Absolutely.
So yeah, enough talking about the history. I think we've talked enough about that. Let's talk about why this game was so deserving of Game of the Year. Let's talk about the game.
Yes.
Are you
ready? History lesson over.
So I think we can safely go ahead and just jump into the ending on this bad boy.
Yeah.
Let's this is kind of a loaded one. It's it's weird. Playing through this game again, I kind of forgot a lot of the plot because really not all that much happens in this game. You get like
It's an Odyssean plot, which is a good thing. I think personally, given the medium of games and how games work, and from experience playing a lot of games, most game stories that are very successful have Odyssean plots. It's just that most of them do a very good job of hiding them. Almost every Metal Gear Solid game has an Odyssean plot.
yeah.
And by an Odyssean plot, I mean it's episodic in structure where each episode is its own little plot. Think of it like The Hobbit, where there's an overarching goal, but there's each little episode, the trolls, and then the goblins, and then the elves, and the spiders. Each one is its own little self-contained story. I mean, it's called an Odyssean plot because of the Odyssey. You know, he's trying to get back home to Ithaca, to his wife, to his throne, and it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back each episode. He gets on one island and he's stuck there a while, gets on another island, kills a cyclops. Poseidon's like, fuck you, you get set back 10 years, whatever. Each episode is its own thing, and that plays really well in video games because you have to keep in mind that there has to actually be gameplay.
I also just listening to Cory Barlog talk about the development of this game. When they initially developed it, they were basically writing God of War, the next one. I don't want to say God of War 2 because it's probably not going to be called that. But they were focusing a lot on Norse mythology, and it was kind of taken away from the relationship between Kratos and Atreus. So now that they got that out of the way with this one, I feel like the characters they're focusing on for the second game and the plot that they're focusing on is already kind of built because they didn't want to take away from the father-son relationship.
Yeah.
And on top of that,
the characters, the plot is not what's important here. It's
well,
the characters.
On top of that, when you mentioning an Odyssean plot and how it's kind of episodic in nature, I think the each episode, each step of the way is like some sort of progression in their relationship.
Yes,
and that's the main focus of the whole game. That's the whole
it's the same
takeaway.
Thing with The Last of Us. The original Last of Us is an Odyssean plot. It's basically getting Ellie to the Fireflies, and each individual episode that they go through is one more step in their journey overall towards getting there. But it's also getting Ellie and Joel closer together in terms of their character.
Yeah,
totally.
Okay, so let's dig into the ending a little bit because we're getting kind of carried away. One thing I do want to bring up before we talk about this is just like some of the intricacies of Norse mythology. They make some assumptions that I thought were interesting, and I just want to bring up. Really, the big one is that Frigg and Freya, who are often considered the same person, just with different names. This game assumes that they are the same person.
Yeah.
I'd recently read a book. I read Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. That assumes that they're different people.
So Freya was originally, in some interpretations of Vanir. The Vanir are the gods of fertility. The Aesir are the gods of war, which is, as in most pantheons, there's usually one side that represents the feminine aspect, one side the masculine, fertility being the feminine in Norse mythology, war being the masculine. Order and chaos in, say, Persian mythology, same thing. Same thing when you go throughout Greek and what have you. But yes, like Mark said, depending on what ancient sources you go to or what archaeologist or
really what interpretation
talk to, exactly, what reading, depending on who's reading it, because these are ancient languages.
Right. So with this continuity, with this interpretation, it assumes that Freya and Frigg are the same person. Frigg being a pet name for Freya by Odin, meaning beloved. And with that assumption in mind, this means that Freya, or Frigg, as typically is the mother of Balder.
Right.
So that's like important for the entire game because, as we know the story of Balder, he is only vulnerable to mistletoe, which ultimately is how he dies at the end of this game. Or at least
Right.
not dies, but becomes mortal.
And see, it's interesting, that little thing. I'm
Or I
really
shouldn't
glad.
say mortal, I should say vulnerable.
Right.
Let me just make that
It
correction.
breaks the spell that was placed on. It's the only thing that can break the spell that was placed on him
Because it's
by
the
Freya.
right, and that's because in the mythology, Freya, in order to make sure no harm was brought to her son, went to everything in the world asking it not to harm her child.
And
And
when sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say when I played the game initially, I just thought that that was her way of protecting her son is just a son for no other reason than it's her baby. But then when I was speaking to my friend Ryan Cahill about relation to mythology, to Norse mythology, it's because there was a prophecy that he was going to die, that he was deemed to die.
Yes.
And that's why she decided to put the curse on him, which is what the tattoos represent on his body, all the like different spells and hexes that she casted on him to make him invulnerable.
It should also be noted that Balder is supposed to be this this beautiful man.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
there's like two
he's like a
versions of
junkie.
him.
He's basically like a junkie.
He very much was like
He's
not
a
the most-
sociopath.
Yeah. It was kind of an
I
interesting
like-
interpretation of the character.
But I like that because
No, I didn't mind it at all.
In the other trilogy, we've already gotten the portrayal of gods as we think of them in terms of mythology. So it was nice to see the gods here, the Norse gods, portrayed as like what real Norsemen would look like.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But just another note on the mistletoe, and I'm really glad we decided to play this game again because before I replayed the game, I had thought that I would come into this talking about the story as, okay, this is a really good character story that makes up for a lot of plot contrivance. But I did not realize until I replayed it and paid more attention how just about everything I thought was a contrivance is actually set up really well multiple times throughout the story. For instance, we're talking about the mistletoe here. The Sindir gives
Atreus.
Sindri. Sindri gives Atreus the mistletoe earlier on in the game, and Freya immediately takes it and throws it in the fire.
Yeah.
And there's no reason given. There's no explanation.
She said it's cursed or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, it's terrible. Here, take my arrows, whatever. But earlier on, in order to repair his strap after it's broken, Kratos uses a piece of the mistletoe to bolt it up. So there's actually a lot of setup for that if you're paying attention. And I was like, oh, so all these plot issues that I thought were in the game, it was just because I wasn't paying attention the first time I played the game. Like, it's actually really well thought out.
Yeah, this is one of those games where if you've played it before, I agree with you. This is one of those games where if you played it before, going back and replaying it, it's a good thing they added a new game plus mode. Going back and replaying it, you can actually get a lot out of noticing new things. One of the other, I'll bring up another thing that you start to notice a lot more on a repeat playthrough in a bit. I want to get through the ending a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, so basically, Boulder punches Atreus and hits the mistletoe that's on his belt, and that goes through his hand and breaks the spell. And because of that, they're able to kill him.
And his acting throughout that bit, I mean, his acting throughout the entire game is phenomenal, but just like the overjoy that he has at feeling pain and snow and everything is just like masterfully done.
Yes, he's a good villain.
Yes,
and you wouldn't expect it from like the beginning where he just seems weird, like a discount Joker. But
I could see that.
As you learn more about him as the game goes on, like it really is. He becomes an enthralling character in his own right.
And because we killed him, Freya fucking threatens us.
Well,
and I wonder, like, what the hell she's gonna do in the second game.
I do want to say something I kind of glossed over in my notes was not necessarily that Kratos and Atreus, or really Kratos for the most part, kills Balder, but he actually shows him mercy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And doesn't kill him until he's
about to kill Freya.
Kratos does that to break the cycle of revenge, and kills Balder to save Freya. And of course, he doesn't really break the cycle, because now, instead of Balder wanting revenge on his mother wants revenge on Kratos.
Yeah, right, and exactly.
This is the important thing. So it should be noted, like you said, Freya asks Balder to forgive her, and he refuses. He says he can't. And he goes to kill her, and like Mark said,
and
Kratos
to be clear, also,
to save her.
She's totally complicit about it.
Yes, exactly.
She's 100% like, fine, if you can't, then take my life. And
as Kratos says, she's a parent. She can't make the choice that needs to be made, because he'll still continue to come after them anyway. But this is why earlier I said the first game is the most important, because the story of this game is, in many ways, the inverse. The first game, the original God of War, is just straight up a revenge game. It's a revenge story.
Well, the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
The whole trilogy, yeah. But in terms of, in my opinion, the first game is the most cohesive revenge story. I mean, but the point being is that Kratos chooses... he takes the god's offer to give him the power of Pandora, or to give him the information and get the power of Pandora to be able to kill Ares for betraying him, quote unquote. But he finds out then that he has to become the god of war and suffer for all eternity and all that fun stuff. And here he deals throughout the game with his legacy and his shame, but at the end he makes the choice not to do that, and like you said, Mark, to break the cycle. So this game is in many ways a foil to the first game.
Yeah.
And that's why playing the trilogy is so important, because you see all of the gods that he killed and how far he's come in this God of War. And when he says to Balder, like, there will be no peace in this, it has so much weight. Like, if you don't play the original games, that statement just seems like a statement you say to tell someone not to have revenge. But there was so much weight behind the way he said it and the way he like looked Balder in the eyes. And there's just so many moments like that we'll get into, specifically with the music score in relation to like what Kratos needs to do and what he says. But I don't want to. We'll get there.
Yeah, let's
it's funny because ending. It's funny to go with the ending right before he kills, or actually, is it either right before or right at? No, it's right after he kills Balder. Freya makes a snide remark, like, does he know Atreus? Does he know who
she
you
blows
really
the
are?
spot.
Yeah, and then he straight up is just like, I'm the ghost of Sparta. I killed many people, some deserving, some not. And then he turns him and is like, I killed my father. And I'm like, bitch, you killed more than you killed your uncles, you killed your aunts.
Well, really,
you killed Titans.
In relation to Atreus, that's the one that's most relevant, especially because that's the one that Atreus saw when they were escaping hell. He did see his father attacking Zeus and punching the absolute shit out of him.
But it was that moment where he told Atreus that he's the ghost of Sparta, that the same music that when Kratos needs to go get the Blades of Chaos again when he didn't want to, the same exact music plays, and it's just so freaking epic.
Yeah.
Well, the difference with that scene, and this is the important character development for Kratos, is, and this game is all about legacy. It's him coming to terms with his legacy, but realizing that he can choose for a better future, and particularly a better future for his son.
And also, and really that he doesn't need to pass that on. That legacy doesn't need to live on through his kin.
And this is something that really pissed me off at the time that this game came out. A lot of people were like, oh, this is just The Last of Us God of War. And I'm like, no, they're fundamentally different games. I mean, yes, they are father-child you could say relationship games, but anybody who's had siblings knows that a father-daughter relationship, both in real life and in stories, are typically very different from father-son relationships. Um, Whereas father-daughter relationships tend to be about duty, which is what we see in The Last of Us. In God of War, it's about legacy and what he passes on through Atreus. They're just very different stories.
So, all right, let's move on. We still got more of the ending to talk about, and I'm sure
Yes.
more of this will unwind. I want to talk about them reaching Jotunheim. This is what we've been working towards throughout the entire game. Is Kratos and Atreus reaching the highest peak in all 9 realms, for them to spread Faye's ashes. And Faye, that's important, that they've known her as Faye. They reach Jotunheim. They start climbing the peak, and they come across this mural that Atreus, being able to read the language, reads the mural, and we find out Faye is Lao Faye, who is a frost giant, and she had foreseen everything. The entire journey was on this mural of her leaving the frost giants and coming to Midgard, having Atreus with Kratos. And I guess we can go ahead and assume that with this version of Norse mythology, Kratos is the replacement for Farbauti, who is supposed to be this really strong warrior. I guess he's just now part of this mythology as that. But they have Atreus, and they see this mural, and meeting the world serpent Jormungandr, and defeating Balder, and all this, and then you see under that cloth, or Kratos sees it, Atreus doesn't. How would you guys interpret that? Seemingly, obviously we know it's something
looked
that's
like
coming.
Atreus holding a die. It looked like Atreus holding a dying Kratos.
It looked like they were both. Go ahead, Delaila.
No, I was gonna say it looked like Atreus had a snake over. Yeah, like you said, Kratos dying. Whether he kills him or whether he's like trying to save him in some way is unclear. But
Yeah, because in myth, from my understanding, so the game kind of goes into, everybody keeps talking about how Kratos is. You said that he's supposed to take the place of like this particular warrior.
Yeah.
But everybody keeps talking about how Kratos' presence has changed things. I interpreted that as he had kind of messed up the timeline and now has accelerated it because they're going into Fimbulwinter.
There is that, yeah. There is the fact that Fimbulwinter seems to be starting early.
And that basically Loki was born earlier than he was supposed to be.
Yeah, so that's the next part, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's jump into is that on this mural, Atreus is known by the name Loki. Everyone's favorite trickster of Norse mythology. And that's
very different in mythology than in the Marvel comics.
Yes, very. I mean, and Thor as well. But yeah, I bring up Kratos replacing Farbauti because Farbauti was Loki's father.
Yes.
And the description that I've read of Farbauti seems to fit Kratos pretty well. That's why I'm kind of going with that's who Kratos is meant to be in this continuity, so to speak. I don't know. Looking at it, just to jump back to this mural, it's kind of tricky because there's like I'm looking at it right now as we speak. There's like
apparently the giants are arguing with La Fey.
Well, I'm speaking more to the final bit of it looking like Atreus is holding Kratos, but there's also like that snake-like thing.
Well, like we were talking about before the show, there's some sort, depending on which version you look at it, like you were saying in the one that you had read, the world serpent was Loki's offspring, whereas
Yes.
I have seen versions where, because in actual Norse mythology, Loki is a shapeshifter
Yes.
and he has become Fenrir.
And
But I've
to
also seen
mention real
versions.
quick, like he even Atreus alludes to that in the game with a line when he finds out that he's a god. He asks, "Can I turn into a wolf?"
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And but I've seen versions where he can become the world serpent.
Okay.
So, but the snake also, there's another part when it comes to the prophecy of Ragnarok. So, after the death of Balder, Loki is supposed to be punished by being like wrapped up by a snake and tortured
Yes.
until he eventually escapes, and then he
Yes.
joins the giants to fight the Aesir in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Um, so who knows how that will play out?
There's
Yeah.
also that part when you're on the Lake of the Nine that when you first meet the world serpent, you hear him say like that he kind of recognizes Artreus and that he's a curious person, but they don't really expand on that. And when I was having the conversation with my friend Ryan, she said that Artreus in a version of Norse mythology is actually the world serpent's father. But
Yes.
Yeah.
that might not necessarily mean like blood. It could mean other things.
Well, so what I'm thinking, because we also do hear that during the Battle of Ragnarok, Jormungandr in his fight with Thor gets sent back in time somehow, which is the only way I can see it making sense that he recognizes Loki as, a young version of his own father.
Mm.
Not sure how that'll play out in the sequel, obviously. It's kind of a weird thing, and who knows, like I kind of subscribe to the idea that that's the reason, and if that's the reason he recognized them, and if so, and if I'm right about him in this continuity being his father, we will see him give birth to Fenrir and Hel. By the way, Hel is his other child in versions that I've read.
Yes. Yes.
Those are his 3 giant children that he has with Angerboda.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm interested to see how that plays out. And I wonder, it's a good thing you bring up the torture by the snake. I wonder if that's what this mural is supposed to represent. Instead of Atreus / Loki, it's Kratos that gets tortured and killed
Huh.
Right.
prior to
I
Ragnarok.
could see Kratos sacrificing himself for
Yeah.
Atreus,
And that was even brought up.
and kind of fucking up the whole Ragnarok prophecy.
And Kratos even mentions that. He mentions like that he put his life on the line for Atreus if it meant keeping him safe.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that is what that's supposed to mean.
And as we'll talk about in a second, it's safe to assume, since we're getting into Fimbulwinter and we'll see Thor, it's kind of safe to assume Thor and the World Serpent will have some bit to play.
Well, yeah, we
whatever.
already know. Like, there's already pre-established history that Jormungandr hates Thor. The first time we see Jormungandr,
Yeah.
or not the first time, I think the second time after you get Mimir, he Jormungandr gets up and he just eats the statue of Thor because he hates him so much.
Well, they're supposed to fight each other.
Yes, they are supposed to
until
fight each other in Ragnarok.
end of the world. Yeah.
So, yeah, if you played this game and you never went home, please go home.
People really didn't go home.
I think some people just never thought to do it because, like,
but they tell you to do it.
they tell you to do it, but like, I don't think there's an objective. It's just kind of like
which I like.
Yeah, it's like after you leave Jotunheim, the game just like kind of wraps up and is like, oh, we can go exploring or we can go home, and then there's so much stuff to do in the game that it's like, well, I wouldn't be surprised if people don't go home.
Yeah,
I do love that sequence though they give. I guess many people were tricked because the credits play as you're leaving Jotunheim,
Yes.
and I love
which
that
all
sequence
credits
where,
should play out like that, please.
That was
Brilliant.
and I love how Kratos is telling the story of Atreus, the Spartan warrior.
Yeah,
that was genius.
Which is, yeah, and it was cool to hear like some origin story, not to mention Kratos opening up about his Spartan origins to his son now that the cat's out of the bag. it's cool to hear more about his past, even stuff, with such a storied history as Kratos, like stuff we didn't know prior.
I love that you hear about that going through the credits, and then when you finally go home, like this game doesn't take anything from like Thor or Loki from the Marvel comic books, but that ending was so Marvel. Like that was like a Marvel end credit scene to the T.
Yeah, so to just talk about it real quick, yeah, if you go home, Kratos and Atreus lay in bed to sleep, and you get a scene of them waking up because they hear thunder cracking outside. And
years later,
yes,
it says some years later.
It does say some years later. Kratos grabs his axe, opens the door, and out there is a shadowy figure, with thunder and lightning cracking behind him. And Kratos yells to him, "Who are you?" And he moves his cloak to the side, and you see Mjolnir.
Mm-hmm.
And then it cuts to black, and they wake up, and it's present day, where Atreus is like, "Oh, I had a dream." And they talk about it real quick before you go out to, find and kill Valkyries and shit, whatever else you have left to do in the world.
Right.
Yeah. And it makes sense that Kratos wouldn't want his son to be named Loki because he just hates gods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just what a cool way to end your game and then tease the next one, however many years out that might be at this point.
Oh my god, when they announce it, I'm flipping my shit.
But yeah, that kind of covers the ending, at least to the extent that I want to talk about it. I think now we should really talk about Kratos and Atreus' relationship as it progresses through the game. Because we go through so many different points between the two of them.
I mean, I think the main progression is just the fact that throughout the whole game he's calling him boy, and at the very end he calls him son.
Well, yeah.
And so that was like one of the more like minor forms of progression that he's like finally,
he slowly starts calling him Atreus over time.
Mm-hmm.
He only calls him that like when he's worried about him. Like he can't find him or anything until the end.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like there's more to it than just that, because they do go through several stages. So the first point that I have is like at the beginning of their relationship, at the beginning of this game,
they don't even know each other. Yeah.
Well, yeah, barely. And Lao Fei died. Oh, yeah, that's one thing I want to talk about before we move on to that. Sorry. I want to talk about Fei because she's Lao Fei. She's this frost giant, and it's kind of this is the other reason why I think it's so rewarding to go back through the game after having played it, and you notice a lot more things. All of those handprints and all of the you know how in
everything
games,
that marks you can climb. And,
yes, like whenever there's a climbable surface, it's colored a different way. This game,
the yellow.
This game handles that by claiming and insinuating that all of the gold paint and everything that like insinuates this is the way to go. It's heavily implied that was all left by Lao Fei. She was with them the whole time, guiding them. She knew that they would reach Jotunheim, and she helped that happen. And it's kind of interesting to think about, like, well, you knew I was going to grab this cliff.
They should have had an unlockable that if you beat the hardest difficulty, give me God of War, you get a special credit sequence that just shows Lao Fei like walking through Helheim, like painting all of the climables in Helheim, and she's just walking up the mountains painting the climables with like a little paintbrush, like Looney Tunes style.
You better not get fucking confused by this.
Yeah.
But yeah, the implication there is that she was guiding them. She was the one that laid out their path to make sure that they got there. And also the other thing that I found interesting in reading about after beating the game a second time, I didn't realize that the beginning of the game, the first thing that you do is Kratos is there crouched by a tree with the golden handprint on it, and the first thing he does is he chops down that tree. And the first mission of the journey is the marked trees. I found in reading after that they were holding up a protective barrier around that house to make sure the gods couldn't find her or find them. But we find out that when Baldur comes knocking, it's because Kratos chopped down that tree and that got rid of the magic barrier that was protecting them. And Baldur came knocking, not looking for Kratos. If you go back and pay attention to his dialogue, he doesn't know Kratos is there, and he's not looking for Kratos. He's looking for Laufey, and that's because the gods have this like huge hatred of the frost giants. As you find out throughout the game, going to Jotnar shrines and Mimir telling you tales more about the frost giants, you find out that like so many of them are just like flat out murdered by Thor and the Aesir gods in general. Yeah,
when we say gods, we mean the Aesir particularly.
Yes,
because there are a lot of gods that are not Aesir,
and in particular. In particular, the gods in question that do these killings are, for the most part, Thor and Odin.
Yeah, basically.
But yeah, I found that really interesting on a second playthrough, and it recontextualizes a lot of things. Baldur doesn't show up looking for Kratos; he's looking for Faye.
Yeah.
And the reason being is her origin. She's a frost giant. They want her. She's this guardian of Jotunheim that they're trying to find so they can get to Jotunheim.
That, and I think I picked up, and I might be wrong. I don't know if you guys were getting this sense. I got the sense that she was also somewhat of a prophet, and I think Atreus inherited that. Yeah.
The giants in general.
I think Odin was seeking that knowledge as well, in addition to access to Jotunheim.
He does love seeking that knowledge.
Yep.
Didn't he like take something from Mimir in order to get like that sort of prophecy? His eye, yeah.
Yeah, and
which is blessed with the sight from the giants. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although he just stores it.
Yeah, he stores it in the statue of Thor, and you wind up having which was a really cool sequence. If not a little silly, but. I completely forgot that that's what leads right into the final encounter.
Yo, Odin, just go read a book, man.
Go to the library.
Yeah. Stop killing them giants.
But yeah, so to go back to Atreus and Kratos' relationship, I wanted to talk about Laufey because I wanted to talk about that before we moved on. The important thing to note about her relationship to Atreus was that she was always there. She was who Atreus spent most of his time with, because Kratos was always out hunting. He was never really there and around the house. He was mostly a provider. So Atreus obviously has a lot of affinity for his mother. So her passing, we find it when they go to Alfheim. And Kratos steps into the light, like he hears Atreus kind of wishing that the roles were swapped, that Kratos was the one that died and that Laufey was the one still alive guiding them. And then Atreus has to pull Kratos out of the light because he was in there for a really long time, even though it felt like only moments had passed, and Atreus was really pissed. So we get a lot of like at the beginning of their relationship, we get a lot of resentment from Atreus towards his father, which then progresses like pretty shortly afterwards, where Atreus confronts him about not missing Faye, and Kratos says, "Do not mistake my silence for lack of grief."
Yeah,
and that brings Atreus to realize, like, oh no, it's kind of a learning lesson almost. He's teaching his son, like, there are many ways to grieve, and this is my way of doing so.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that
Atreus was all about his mother until he found out he was a god, and then he was like, he was like mean to Sindri, and Kratos was like, oh, your mother wouldn't like that. He's like, well, my mom's not a god, because at that time he didn't know who she was.
Right.
I thought that part was hysterical.
And I think you're right,
feeling
Mark.
Himself.
I think you're right, Mark. That's an important turning point, because from then on, Kratos kind of realizes he has to he has to bond with this boy, and he does so really in the only way he knows how, in that he begins to mentor him more in the ways of a warrior.
Yeah.
But he also, deep down inside that he wants to be like empathetic, loving father, because there's so many moments in the game where, like
Yeah.
when Atreus first killed the elk and he had to like Kratos forced him to put the knife in
Finish
the elk
him.
to finish him, basically, to skin him. And he saw like how that changed Atreus, like just feeling that sense of skin. He went to go put his hand on his
Yeah.
back to like console him and then pushed away. And he does that like 2 or 3 times. Another time when like Atreus was like mourning over his mother, he went to like console him, but then stopped himself from actually putting his hand on his back. Just those subtle moments are so good.
So
And it's also interesting how it goes back and forth where Kratos will be teaching him these ways of the warrior, but at the same time, when Atreus goes all out, when Atreus goes out, Kratos will lash out at him for going out. And in a way, he's getting angry at Atreus for being like him.
yeah.
Yes.
So before we get to cocky little shit mode, as we're starting to inch closer and closer.
Oh well,
to
that goes even earlier, all the way back to that first troll fight. Wait, was it a troll
I
or?
wouldn't say that's him being cocky. I would say that's him being naive. And I think there's a big difference there. He at that point he's like, yeah, I can take him, I can help, but he quickly realizes, oh no, like I can help, but very, very little. Like, Dad, you got to take care of this.
I think in that moment he just lost control over himself.
Oh well, yeah.
He had felt what it's like to kill something.
It's the losing control. Yeah, it's the losing control.
After the troll dies and he starts slashing at him, yes, that's just a loss of control. But that's not him being cocky. At least not to
No,
me.
that's not what I meant at all. I'm more meant the loss of control. Yeah,
oh,
you
gotcha,
phrased it better.
Gotcha. Before that, like we see, and this was kind of a weird. I'm still not sure I really fully get this or agree with this plot point in terms of it making sense, but they get confronted by Magni and Modi, Thor's sons. And during that confrontation, Magni is killed. Modi goes and gets away, and Atreus gets really, pissed because they kept poking fun at him and taking jabs at his mother, and he starts to get sick again. And then when you go back to Tyr's temple, Modi confronts them again. Kratos gets him, damages him and sends him away, but Atreus is just like full on sick. And we find out the reason he's sick is because it's like a mental block of him being
conflicted.
Yeah, he's a god who believes himself mortal.
This was the one point I couldn't get past.
Yes.
As well. Yeah.
It's kind of a weird.
It works on a character level, but from a plot perspective, you're right. You kind of just have to look past it.
Yeah.
It's like the one knock of all the things that I realized they had actually set up, this was the one that I had a problem with originally and still kind of had a problem with.
I agree.
Although it does set up for the best scene in the game and one of the best scenes ever in gaming.
Yes. Which is, I assume you're talking about Kratos going home to retrieve the Blades of Chaos.
The Blades of Chaos, exactly. I was just gonna say that's all it was there for.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Because that's a really cool scene again for people that have played the original trilogy, because it shows you basically see the world through Kratos' eyes, and you see that he's haunted by Athena.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who at the end of God of War 2, she sacrifices himself when he goes to kill Zeus. He winds up killing Athena, who reveals that Zeus is his father, and then Athena, her ghost, kind of eggs him on in 3 to kill the gods, and ultimately at the end of the game, when she wants the power of hope from Pandora's box. Instead, Kratos returns it to the people, and Athena, gets pissed about that. But she haunts Kratos.
Yeah.
And when he goes to retrieve the Blades of Chaos, she, tells him,
You're still a monster.
She calls him the ghost of Sparta, and is like, yeah, you'll always, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you'll always be a monster.
It's like, I won't be your monster though. Yeah. Fucking love that scene is perfection.
Yeah, it's really, really fantastic for fans of the franchise, just like to get that level of history between this enigmatic character.
Not only that, but like it was a major shift in combat, because the whole time you're playing with the Leviathan axe, which controls significantly differently from the Blades of Chaos, because we were used to like hack and slash.
Yeah.
And while it didn't feel as like hack and slashy playing with the Blades of Chaos in this game as the previous games, it still brought you back to that feeling.
It felt very familiar, all things considered.
Yeah.
I have a lot I want to say about the combat, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it getting the Blades of Chaos and having them added to your arsenal does do a lot for making the game feel a little more familiar compared to past games.
Yeah.
But okay, so yeah, he goes and gets the Blades of Chaos so we can go into hell and gets the thing that he needs and helps Atreus recover from his sickness. And that, yeah, like Jason was saying, it's the one bit of the story that I'm kind of like, you couldn't have found a better way to write that plot point in. Like it just, to me, it seemed a little sloppy and a little nonsensical, but it got the plot moving. So
I'm curious if there is some sort of like Norse relevance to it that maybe we don't know, but hopefully someone in the comments can let us know if there is.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just like they were trying to put in like, he's getting sick because of this mental paradox of he's a god that believes himself to be mortal. And I don't know, maybe there is some sort of story regarding that. Yeah.
It's kind of weird because at the end of the game, Atreus says, I'm both a god and a giant. And then Kratos says, and a mortal. So it's like, wait, what?
Well, that's because
Kratos... I thought the whole point of that sequence was that he wasn't immortal.
Well, I think that's because Kratos was born of a mortal woman.
No, I know that.
I mean, that's my assumption as to what he meant by that, but I could be wrong.
But I thought the whole point was that he wasn't mortal. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but okay, so yeah, Kratos saves him and tells him that he's a god, and that's when cocky little shit mode begins. And it's so interesting from a gameplay perspective how that progresses, because even when you go to like shoot arrows, press the sun button. Whatever.
Yeah.
And also,
so
like,
good.
I don't know if I noticed this before. I definitely noticed it this time around. He didn't respond to a lot of my button presses during that sequence as much.
No.
There were so many combat encounters when we'd go in, and he would just run up and start knifing dudes. And I'd be like, dude, summon the fucking electric elk. And he's like, fuck you, Draugrs, and starts stabbing them in the face. And I'm like, dude, like, summon the fucking thing. I'm telling you to do this.
On my original playthrough, I didn't focus my skill points really at all on Atreus. Okay. But this time I did. I maxed out his trees. I was like using them hardcore.
Yeah.
So I actually noticed it way more on this playthrough.
He's very useful. He's incredibly useful, and then it makes it all the more annoying when he's gets into cocky little shit mode and he starts blatantly ignoring your orders, and when you just want to summon the damn electric elk or whatever summon you, I use the elk quite a bit for that chunk of the game.
Ravens, crows.
Crows.
There's crows.
There's a wolf.
Yeah, there's wolves. There's a stampede.
There's a
of
boar,
boars.
right?
Yeah, there's a lot. But yeah, so and then you see him kill Modi. To which Kratos tries to tell him, there's consequences to killing a god. And he's like, how do you know? Kratos still won't fucking tell him.
That's also a great point, though, because that's where we see kind of Kratos turning, where we see that conflict where he's trying to change the future of his son to not be like him, because Kratos in the previous trilogy did not think of the consequences of
Yeah.
killing a god.
But yeah, they get back up to that peak to try and go to Jotunheim again. Balder comes up there, tries to turn them against each other, and they wind up back in Helheim. And Atreus just kind of like comes to, and I don't know. How did you guys see this? Like, was the implication that he was under like some sort of trance that he didn't realize he was in? During the journey out of hell, he starts
face
seeing
to face with himself in hell.
Yeah,
Killing Modi.
Modi.
And that's when we kind of see him snap out of it. And as we go through, it kind of culminates from there. It's kind of an uphill, and then it culminates in the Temple of Tyr, when he kind of talks about how like we all did it together, Dad, you, me, Mimir, the dwarves, and then Mimir's like, oh, now the boy's got his equilibrium, and Atreus is like, what does that mean? And Kratos is like, he means you speak wise, boy. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like the character had a little, not arc, but an arc, but an inverted arc.
Yeah.
Where like when he finally is confronted by him killing Modi, I think he understands how much. And also right before that, Kratos just grabs him and yells at him like, you are not yourself, and understand that it is because of you that we are here.
Yeah. It kind of threw me for a loop, him saying, or Atreus seeing that and saying like, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. And it made me question whether or not he was totally cognitive of the actions that he took.
I could see it being interpreted as that. I don't think it was how it was meant, though. I think it was more meant as a child not understanding the consequences of his actions
and kind of being in disbelief once he's brought face to face with them. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a reasonable explanation for that. Okay, so yeah, that's the majority of their progression that we haven't talked about yet. The only other thing was just we talked briefly about, but I think we said all we needed to was after they reconcile and Kratos winds up killing Balder. He tells he just lets the cat out of the bag. Atreus, I'm from a land called Sparta. I killed many people, some deserving, some not. And then they find out the truth about Faye and Jotunheim and the giants and Loki and all that. So, but yeah, I wanted to go through that whole progression because I wanted to add that on to Jason's point of this being like kind of an episodic and Odyssean plot.
Yeah,
because
this happens in increments. Like we didn't even touch on. There's a whole chapter where they go to the elves.
I talked about that in the sense that it led to Kratos realizing his Atreus's resentment towards him, and as they're leaving Alfheim.
Sorry. Yeah.
But like everything leading up to that, is just kind of hinting at the resentment and the lack of relationship that they have.
Yeah.
So there's not like too much more to add up until that point.
But the overall point is just that this arc is kind of sprinkled one piece, one step in each one of these episodes, and it works very well. So that even if you're bored by a particular area, which I can't see how, this game is beautiful and but even if you don't necessarily are not enjoying an area for its plot or what's going on plot-wise, you'll enjoy that character dynamic as it progresses.
Yeah.
So there's a few more characters that I really want to talk about. The first one I say we talk about is one of the two big characters of this game that we never really see, and that's Tyr. Which I want to bring up because he's a really not only because he's integral to the plot moving forward with his temple and him being such a good friend of the giants and ultimately giving them a way to get to Jotunheim, but he's a really excellent foil to Kratos.
Right.
Because he is...
That's the point.
Yeah, Tyr is the Norse god of war, but he's more so... less a god of war and more a god of peace, of treaty, and of justice. He's a god of war that uses it for good, and we also and we find out that with the giants giving him the gift of their sight and him being just able to travel to realms outside of the 9 realms, he obviously made his way to many different pantheons, many different mythologies. We see that on the one Jotnar shrine that we see in Odin's chambers, and also in his temple. Jeez, I couldn't think of the word temple.
Yeah, we see Egypt, Greece. I don't remember. I don't remember if it was Persian. We might have seen Hindu. I can't remember what the bottom 2 were.
I wasn't sure of 2 of them, but the thing I want to bring up, this was actually secretly.
Well, it wouldn't be Persian. It would be like Babylonian, but
yeah. Secretly, I think this might have been one of my favorite scenes. Was them being in Tyr's temple and going through the treasure room, and Kratos seeing the urn.
Yeah.
With himself painted on it, and he destroys it before Atreus can see it.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Secretly, that's one of, if not my favorite scene of the game.
I also love when he takes the other urn, and it specifically because it has wine in it.
Yes,
and he has Atreus drink some.
Yes. That is a nice nod to another nice nod to his origins, to
right.
his place of birth, his home. But yeah, seeing that urn was just really cool. It helped it show like how worldly Tyr was, and also kind of how legendary and evil Kratos was.
And for all you Game of Thrones fans, yes. Can't remember what specific interview it was, but Tyr, the name-wise at least, was inspiration for Tyrion, because it's kind of an irony, because Tyrion is a midget, but has all the same traits.
So yeah, I wanted to bring up Tyr. He's an unseen character, but he's so important, and he's really used as a complete polar opposite to Kratos, despite being the god of wars of their respective pantheons.
And it also goes to emphasize another one of the themes that a theme that we talked about earlier was that it's about Kratos realizing that he doesn't just have to accept his legacy, he has a choice going forward.
Yeah, there's only a couple more characters I really want to talk. We haven't talked about probably one of all of our favorite characters. We haven't talked much about Mimir.
Oh yeah. I love how he just knows about the Greeks. He's like,
yeah, because he knows everything.
Knows everything.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that they chose to have the sight of the giants go beyond the 9 realms.
Yeah.
So basically, it's like, I'm assuming you're Greek. Athena gave it away. You weren't talking to me. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Okay. So we're going there. Yeah.
He had already assumed prior to that Kratos was Greek, and Athena was the final nail in the coffin.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finds out, oh shit, Zeus is your dad.
Yeah.
Whoa. But Mimir is just like, he's such an entertaining character.
He's a great companion character.
Yes, he's just a fucking head tied to your belt.
Yeah,
but the best accessory ever.
Yeah, getting in a boat, and man, it sucks because like you'd get in a boat and then you'd row for 30 seconds to your destination, and then like Mimir waits that 29 seconds to start telling a story, and they're so captivating that you're just like, well shit, I'm not gonna dock, I'm just gonna sit here and listen to you at the beach while you tell me the story.
Especially when you're like pressed for time, you're like, oh god, I gotta go to bed, I got work in the morning. No, I gotta listen to this. Like,
and because
it also plays into the story. Like, way before you find out who Freya really is, he talks about the war between the Vanir and the Aesir, and how the leader of the Vanir married herself to Odin at the request
As a sign of
of
peace.
as a sign of peace, but also it was brokered by the advisor to Odin, who you also don't know at the time was Mimir himself.
Yeah.
Like Mimir just tells you all of this without actually telling you who it is. And again, it's foreshadowing for later on. Like,
And there's I love those parts where it's like, why didn't you tell us this? He's like,
I love. How
would
he
you
just
believe
refers
me
to
if
him
I
as
told you
Ed,
I forgot?
which is part of the bewitchment
Yes,
that
yeah.
Yeah,
he
from
can't, he
Freya.
can't say how he's invulnerable because then they can get rid of the bewitchment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every Jason needs a Mimir in every game, so he doesn't have to read notes for lore.
Yeah,
Um yeah, and he tells like original stories, but also if you I love how you go to a Jotnar shrine, like you go to so many early in the game before you even have Mimir with you, and you know Atreus will look at it and he'll interpret it and be like, "Oh, that's Thamur. It looks like this happens. I wonder why." And then later, when you get Mimir and you're rowing around, he's like, "Oh, do you know the story of Thamur and Loki's or Atreus?"
Arcturus.
Yeah. Atreus is like, yeah, I just know this, and Mimir gives him a shit ton more context, and the journal updates on that story, giving that additional context
and
provided by Mimir.
and I love the voice acting and the diction that they gave to him.
Yeah,
It'll be like Loki. God, Atreus will
yeah,
say
it's gonna be
something
hard now.
like yeah, Atreus will say, something like, "Oh, he must have been, a big guy," and then Mimir will just be like, "Yeah, he was a right mean bastard," or something like that. Like it's just there's a lot of character put into him, and really well done.
Yeah,
And we'll obviously talk about them, but same with the dwarves.
yeah. I mean, we can go right into them right now. Brock and Sindri. So from what I read, I read a story that involved Brock and Sindri, and it was the only reason I could tell that they were there involved in any tales with the Aesir was to make Thor's hammer. So it's interesting for them to be
Hmm.
more incorporated in such a bigger part by also having made the Leviathan axe for Laufey,
Yeah,
and also them being kind of side companions throughout the entire game, um, and having their own comic relief in their own ways.
yeah,
They have their own character progression throughout the game, both hating and resenting each other and trying to one up the other secretly every single time one of them runs into Kratos and Atreus. Oh, you let my brother touch this? Well, here, now it's better than anything he could do. And the next one's like, you let him touch this again? Oh, come on, let me fix that. And then it culminates in them eventually coming back together to build them. Well, it was a key to get into Tyr's
for Tyr's temple.
yeah,
Yeah,
a
a
different section
secret
of Tyr's
door,
temple, yeah.
but it's the one that gets you in, and then you can flip over
Yeah.
the key room to the realms. Yeah,
Which was also like, what an absurd moment. Like
yeah.
it happened and I was just kind of like going with it, but it was still just so absurd.
Because you have to think about it from the concept that like all of these realms are existing in the same place,
Yeah, they're
which like is kind of hard to visualize. But
right.
I also like how they use Sindri for Atreus's little arc when he yells at Sindri and like calls him pathetic.
Yes.
And Sindri is almost like a little whimpering dog.
Oh,
You really do
He's
feel
the
bad for
opposite
him.
of Brock.
he has his
Yeah.
own little changes in dialogue whenever you go to a shop during that moment.
Yeah, he's like, I guess I'm not wanted.
Yeah, things along those lines where during that point in time when cocky little shit mode is on, it's like it's along the same lines of how he will go off and do his own thing and just say whatever when you press the sun button and whatnot. Like Sindri also has his moments of change dialogue during that segment. It's really cool. It's good attention to detail.
It's definitely it definitely shows how this game is more of like that. They're like you're basically they're members of your party.
Yeah.
It's not like the originals where it's a one man killing spree. It's more of an adventure game,
Yeah.
and that we'll talk more about that, I guess,
I
in the actual gameplay.
yeah. I like how Brock and Sindri are also just like pretty opposites of one another. Brock is this tough guy, get my hands dirty,
Hmm.
foul mouthed, and Sindri is very uh
He's shy.
he's a germaphobe.
Yeah,
He's
and
shy.
not only is the voice acting good, but the animation
Yeah.
sells it as well. Like you can
Yeah.
see Sindri's shoulders are always coiled up,
Yeah.
whereas Brock is always just laid out and he's like just waggling around. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very well done.
Yeah. That they're great characters. And I also when you finally reach Jotunheim, I loved the bit where they're there just to see them succeed and see them off to Jotunheim to finally complete their journey. And
Right.
Kratos gives Mimir to them, and they're both like, Mimir's like, "Oh God, please hurry back," because Mimir just knows everyone in the realm, and he knows Brock and Sindri, and he, for reasons that we get that are alluded to, but we don't really know, like he doesn't want to be around them for very long.
It's also implied though that Brock is planning something for Mimir, so he might get like a mechanical body.
Ah.
Yeah,
That's the implication I got
yeah.
because Brock says something.
I mean,
You hear it like kind of off screen where he's like, "Let me get these measurements."
probably not mechanical,
Ah.
but like
You understand what I'm saying, though, right? Like,
from the story I read about Brock and Sindri and the dwarves in general is the dwarves can make anything.
yeah,
They can
yeah.
they can fucking make anything, and we even see it like with just improving the axe where they don't really do much. They just smack it with their hammer, and oh, it's improved. Don't believe me? Go use it.
I mean, technically, the dwarves could have just transported themselves to Jotunheim the entire time. Am I right? Because
Uh,
they can
They
just
were teleporting everywhere.
they
yeah,
have
they can
their
just
they have their
teleport
own
between
ways.
realms.
Yeah, they have their own ways of getting around. I'm not sure if Jotunheim would have been accessible, just given how locked down Jotunheim was at that point. But I suppose it's a possibility. But just because they can doesn't mean that Kratos and Atreus could.
Oh, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just
Okay.
saying like dwarves basically they don't give a shit about all these conflicts going on. They're just there to make what they're
Yeah,
making and
they're just there to
go
work.
around. Yeah.
Um, that's what they do. The last character that I really want to talk about is the what might be the main villain and definitely will be the main villain of the next game. I have to imagine another unseen Odin,
Mm.
who is the mastermind that's sending Balder after Faye. That's got
Mm.
Magni and Modi tailing with him. That probably sent Thor to find them. In that little epilogue scene that we got. Odin, we hear so much about him throughout this entire game. We get the sense that he's this awful, awful god, and we never see him whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's interesting from the aspect that we also never see Tyr, but we have such a reverence for Tyr, and
Right.
so does everyone else. Brock and Sindri and everyone else in the world, Mimir, everyone else that we meet has this reverence for Tyr. Tyr as good as he's a foil for Kratos is also a good foil for Odin.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, I look forward to
I
seeing
think
what they do with him.
I think yeah, I think the next not villain because I feel like even in
I,
this game Baldur wasn't really a villain,
Yeah.
but the next like main person that we're gonna be dealing with, I think is gonna be
Thor.
Freya and
Mm.
Thor.
I think it will be Freya, and I think Freya will continue to play. If assuming like there's a trilogy, I think in the next game it will be like you said, Freya and Thor. I don't think if we're gonna see Odin, it will be until after we've beaten, because I think Odin will continue to be kind of a manipulator behind the scenes,
Okay.
and we won't really understand his full plan. I don't even know if it will be so much a plan. It might be The twist might be that Odin is actually just trying to prevent Ragnarok, the same as we probably will be. It will just be, all right, who is going to benefit from which way Ragnarok is prevented?
Well, I think that even just like going to Norse myth as it stands, I think that is something that Odin was after for the most part, was not just knowledge, but yeah, the knowledge to prevent Ragnarok from coming. But we'll
Because
talk.
it seems obvious, again, going back to that mural, it seems like Laufrey had some kind of aim towards Ragnarok. Like her preparations had something to do with preparing for Ragnarok.
I would say definitely a projection of it, an idea of what's to
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about future game expectations at the end of the show. I want to save that for last.
Okay.
Is there anything else story wise that you guys want to talk about?
No, I think we covered it.
I mean, the only other thing, Delilah, is there anything you want to bring up
Nope.
before we move on? The other thing I want to ask is just like another big aspect I feel that was changed moving from the older games to this game was this sense of maturity.
Oh God, yes.
The older games, even all the way up to 3, was very.
Well, what do we mean by mature? Are we talking about like
they were
Are we
very
talking about like the nudity and like?
so
The original trilogy is like adolescence, like horny. It's horny. It's full of aggression and testosterone.
So real quick, what I mean, yeah, is basically that. Like they're ultra violent. You're ripping dudes' heads off and
Because that's all still there.
not as bad. Because when you're fighting a Draugr or a Hellwalker, you crush them, you destroy them, you slash them, you rip them apart and stuff. But it's not as like it's
I would
not
also
to the level
remember
of as
I would remember
graphic.
I would also remember that we're talking about the PlayStation 2.
No, but even no. But even the God of War 3. God of War 3, you rip off. Oh God, what's his name? I can't remember Greek gods' names now.
Was it Apollo?
I think
or
it was
Poseidon?
Apollo. I think it was Apollo. You rip off his head and you use it as a flashlight.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a
happens
fucking
in-
thing that happens in God of War 3.
But that happens in what's the story? The movie. There's a movie. The Titan, whatever Titans. They use Medusa. They cut off Medusa's head and use it to.
Right, but okay. Yes.
That shit happens in Greek mythology all the
I
time.
understood, but we're talking about these games. So going from that and ripping off a dude's head to use it as a
cut
flashlight.
off Mimir's head and use it to get to Yodin.
Yeah, but it's
I know,
like-
I understand. Your point is
You're
taken.
using
I get
him as a
what you're trying to say.
companion to help you, and he tells you to do it. This is like, yeah, get over here. I'm ripping off your fucking head. It's gonna be my
I
new
understand.
flashlight.
All right.
This is
I
also the
think I
first.
understand the
And
point you're trying to make.
The
My argument. Okay, go.
There's the other thing that I know Delilah's about to bring up. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say this is the first game we don't have a sex mini game.
Exactly. That's the other thing.
That's what I was gonna say is the counter argument. Yes, would be that. Although I
The
could
counter
also make
argument
the
is in this
argument-
one he's already had sex and has a child.
Well, not that he's a parent, but the culture, the Greek culture. But yes,
Sure.
that doesn't really excuse it. That doesn't really excuse it. Like, you are right that like in terms of the game is less arcadey, more focused, and yes,
I
is
wouldn't
less
even say-
flamboyant.
yeah, I would say that's a better way of putting it. It's less overt. It's less extreme. It's very much methodical and slow in its presentation of things, and not so much like I'm gonna rip your fucking head off and then we gotta go. I'm gonna fuck Aphrodite and then go kill the rest of the gods. It's
Because like if we're being completely fair, if you look at like Greek paintings of like these mythological
No,
tales in Greek mythology, Mark, I'm completely on your side on this point. I'm just saying if you look at like vases of from ancient Greece. It's like it's just a bunch of people fucking and then gods fighting above them. Like
That's true. But even
sure.
Corey was like, he was seeing it as in the perspective of a father.
Yeah,
but
it was fun.
now.
Yeah, that's he brings that up. He brings that up in Raising Kratos, like, as well as like he's now a father, and these stories, these games, whatever it is you're working on in a creative medium, it reflects the creator's life in a way.
I guess the point I'm trying to make, like, I don't disagree with what you're saying.
No, I understand.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that doesn't like condemn the old games.
I'm not saying it does.
Yeah.
No.
Because I feel like a lot of people use that as an excuse to condemn the old games, and I hate that.
It also makes sense to who Kratos was at the time. Like, he was just a killing machine. He was on a revenge path. Like, it all made sense. Like, even the sex mini games were his way of like masking the fucking rage,
Yeah, right. And he was basking in the glory of his bloodbath. Like, women threw themselves at him because he killed shit. Like,
my point of bringing this up wasn't to bash either game here or there. I just want to bring it up. This is a much more mature God of War game, probably the most mature, and maybe arguably the only mature in a way.
I think there's a big jump from 1 and 2 to 3, but
yeah,
even then from 3 to this, there's a even bigger jump.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the only reason I want to bring that up. And listeners, if it sounds like we're getting contentious or talking over each other a lot, sorry. It's
we're excited.
We're all in agreement.
Yeah.
I was just trying to bring up the counterpoint.
Yeah. We're all laughing, by the way. Like,
exactly.
No, I just want to bring that up
because we're talking about Greek people fucking each other on vases. Like,
I want to bring it up because we've gotten that bit of feedback before, and I do want to just say, like, we record this remotely, obviously, with these trying times. And it's hard to sometimes to carry a conversation when you're remote and over Skype.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the combat.
I mean, just in the way that the story is more methodical, the combat is. Mm-hmm. You're not hacking and slashing.
Yes, I agree.
Until you get the Blades of Chaos, and even then, it's still cleaner.
And I agree. However, I was talking to Jason a little bit about this off mic, and I'll reiterate my thoughts here. I hate to keep comparing this game to past games. Like I hate to compare anything to anything else, because it's like, well, this is its own thing. It should be looked at that way. And while I agree, it's kind of inevitable when you're talking about a sequel in a long time running franchise. Especially when this is the one that severely deviates from how all the other ones are. Replaying this game, I kind of felt like there was a lot missing in the combat compared to previous games. And the reason I feel that way is in the previous games, as you progress, you're building an arsenal. You're getting new abilities, you're getting new weapons and essentially new gadgets to your kit, and you wind up going to the end of the game with this huge arsenal of things to choose from and cycle through and use while fighting enemies. And in this game, they replace that with, you still have 2 weapons by the end. Really, before you even get halfway through the game, you have 2 weapons, but their way of mixing things up is the runic attacks. And I'm just not really about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense in the initial God of War games that you get every weapon of every boss that you killed, But like here, he's not on like a path to like kill every Norse god.
But I guess it's just like, to me, that was more satisfying from a gameplay loop. And this just being like, oh, I opened a chest and got a new runic attack and it has a cooldown of 39 seconds. To me, that's just like not as satisfying. And like a lot of those, honestly, were kind of useless to me. Eventually, I found one that was like, yes, this really fits my play style. And it's good that they give you that variety, but like you even had that variety with the weapons that you got in the originals, and you could unlock like new things to your combo and new moves with them and stuff. It felt like this arsenal that was also constantly being built upon, whereas this feels just like 2 things that you're kind of building on.
Well, So my impression would be that to say a lot of people talked about this game as like an evolution in the series. I think that's a misnomer. This is a change. The
Yes.
old games are fundamentally different kinds of games from a design, a fundamental design
Yeah.
like baseline from the old games. The old games were hallway arcade beat 'em ups.
Hmm.
Okay. Um,
Complete with a combo counter.
like, yeah, and you could go through those games almost entirely using the Blades of Chaos if you wanted to. And like Mark said, you collected that arsenal and that could give you variety. And you could try to get the best combo you could, and you were treated to these awesome cinematic boss fights um, in between to break things up. But there was very little else other to than just go down the hallways and kill the shit out of everything that came at you. This game is more along the lines of, I would I would say less even a an adventure game in the style of Zelda, more actually in many ways a Metroidvania, which I think is
Yes.
one of the reasons I love it so much.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that I would say that in the level design, but not necessarily
not
the
well,
combat.
You need different.
not
You use the weapons for puzzle solving. So like you can't
yeah.
get to certain areas
Yeah,
without getting the blades of chaos or.
but
But
even especially in that regard, it feels lacking because there's only you're only locked out until you get that one other thing, and then I've unlocked everything.
but
Yeah.
there's also a lot more RPG aspects to the combat than the original.
Which
There's a lot more upgrades, and you can focus on which combat style you want to, in terms of like you can really customize it out in terms of the actual statistics of it, based on which items you seek out and which items you invest
Yeah, and
in.
that's another thing that I would say that I'm not completely crazy about. I don't it's that loot loop of I got better arm guards that have these stats and
Hmm.
give you like this low activation perk that makes me regenerate health. And it's like
I agree they didn't do a good job with dealing out and giving you a selection of things you could craft. The loot wasn't, not just the loot, but also the forging wasn't well paced throughout the main story unless you were doing a good amount of side content. Like especially like on this run, I didn't do any side content. I just did straight up the story. And the shit you're gonna find in chests is always gonna outweigh whatever you invest in.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you just upgrade something once or twice, something 2 levels higher will still be worse and will keep you leveled down. It's really
and
weird.
the leveling
It's
system was kind of
so
weird.
so a lot of the leveling won't even become relevant until like the end game for some people,
Yeah.
depending on how they play.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I agree with both of you and Mark. I didn't use the runes too much until I fought the Valkyries. So you really
Oh,
could have
really?
yeah, you could have. Well, I used them, but like, I didn't
use
feel like
them
I
all the
had to
time
use
just because
them.
they were
So-
fun. Yeah.
Something I guess I'll bring up now is I'm replaying through the game. I actually loaded up New Game Plus, and I upped the difficulty from just normal to give me a challenge, the hard mode, so to speak. And New Game Plus does something kind of cool where it like changes up the enemy placements and whatnot. It's not like the same game just again. It's like they actually switch up like which enemies are where and where you have encounters, what those encounters are and stuff. So it does keep you on your toes even if you just come from a fresh playthrough. But that being said, I haven't played this game in 2 years. So I loaded into New Game Plus on hard mode and got to my first encounter and I just couldn't do it.
Right.
I was getting my ass handed to me. It was like, what the fuck is going? So I got about 45 minutes in, quit out, and started a fresh save on hard mode again, and that's how I played through the game. And on hard mode, like I felt like I was constantly riding or dying on those runic attacks. They were saving my ass left and right. But it was a lot more fun playing. I love playing on harder difficulties. It feels super rewarding when you get past an encounter that's been giving you trouble. Although sometimes in this game it gets really, really frustrating trying to get through some certain encounters. but yeah, like I felt like the leveling system is weird because it's all like it's all aggregated from your
It's equipment based. It's not character
and
based. It's not intrinsic.
and it's like an aggregate of like the equipment that you have equipped, like adding on and leveling you up, quote unquote.
I have a problem with that as well. I hate systems that do that.
Yeah, I wasn't crazy about the combat or not the equipment system, just because
I will say I did like this system a lot, particularly the moment to moment combat, the actual like blocking, parrying, the tactical nature of it.
Yeah.
I did like that, but I understand where Mark is coming from on a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that I do favor the arcade beat 'em up style of the originals. I wish there was a way they could have combined the arcade style with the Metrovania design of the world, because that's one of the things I love the most is how this world is designed and how it is essentially a Metroidvania. I love that. It's one of my favorite things in gaming.
All things considered, like it would have been pretty much impossible for them to have incorporated like the old fixed camera.
I'm not even saying that. Just beat 'em up in general.
But like if they were to keep like the intricacies of the previous combat with the level design of this game, it'd be pretty much impossible, just because of how many areas there are in this game and how they're all interconnected and where they all lie in this world. It's like a pretty big world.
Yeah.
It would have been pretty impossible, and I don't necessarily think I want that. I'm not disappointed with what we got in terms of combat. That's why I
say I wish. Like it's not gonna happen. Yeah.
I love the combat, but I do think that it could have done without the armor system and the runes.
Yeah, it's not even that I just feel like they've previously implemented better methods of progression than what we got here.
I don't think they needed to get rid of the armor. I think they needed to simplify the actual RPG mechanics.
Because the thing that I hate doing is like I hate having a giant list of equipment that I have to read every single individual one to understand like how this helps me. So like you wind up getting all those they're not talismans, they're the things that you slot in your weapons or your equipment, your armor rather.
The enchantments.
Thank you. I was like, what the hell?
And you
wind up getting overloaded with them.
And when you're comparing your old armor to your new armor, you got to make sure to take them out so you know exactly what the baseline is that you're comparing.
It's
some of the other armor didn't look cool either.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is that like, all right, make a bunch of armor pieces that look fucking awesome. And then have it be like Zelda, where like you have iron boots that do this, you have these gauntlets that do that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
something like that, where like everything has a set value.
Yeah,
and you're slowly progressing.
Yeah. Again, I don't hate what we got, but I do have grievances with it. It just feels like we get a lot of things, and I hate having to read through a giant list of things to understand which ones are the most ideal to equip.
Well,
and we're nitpicking now because I want to stress again that none of this
damn
really,
near perfect.
Yeah, none of this really, in terms of the moment to moment of the combat, none of this really detracted from my fun with it. I still fucking loved this combat.
Yeah.
In terms of the moment to moment of it. But like the in between kind of dragged, like Mark was saying.
I'm playing Marvel's Avengers right now, and damn, do I wish that Thor's Mjolnir controlled like the Leviathan axe.
Right.
It's so perfect. Like that perfects like Thor's combat in the way that Anthem perfects Iron Man's. And so I just feel like that shouldn't go left without saying that the way the axe controls is perfect, and it's satisfying and feels good. And it's not just for combat, but for puzzles.
I remember when the game came out, like that was one of the most common like gifs and things talked about and thrown around about the game, was just like how satisfying it is to throw the axe like as far as you can and then just press the button and watch it come back.
Yeah.
Man,
And
there's some tricky throws you got to make for if you're trying to get all those ravens, the Odin's
yes,
ravens.
there
Yep.
are. And even like even other just like secrets, there were some tricky throws you had to do, like in Alfheim, where you have those like
Those
bulbs that
pink
you
balls.
yeah
Hmm.
that you have to destroy to get like some chests or even progress. Like there's some tricky the puzzles. Yeah, let's talk about the level design, because like this Metroidvania style like wide linear design was like fucking phenomenal. I
Yes.
Yes.
love the world and like exploring it and finding everything and going back to
Yeah.
now that when you get the Blades of Chaos again, it's like the only additional tool that you get that's needed for puzzles. Well, beside I guess Atreus' arrows count towards that too,
Yeah.
but like that's kind of it. But going back and finishing that stuff is like so satisfying and so fun. At least to
And it's
me.
contained too. It doesn't feel overwhelming. Like I feel like the
Yeah.
first game to do that well was Uncharted 4 with like Madagascar, but this blew it out of the water.
Oh, yeah. This is because there's actual things to do
Well,
in this
even yeah,
in this game.
Nothing feels like extra fluff. Like it all makes sense. It's all contained. Even like you have like 3 dragons, that's it. No more
Yeah,
than 3 dragons.
and those
You
were
have
really
like
cool.
6 wayward spirits, like that's it. It doesn't overwhelm you with tasks to do.
Yeah, this
it feels like almost about as big as, well, obviously if the inside sections are much 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 bigger, but like in terms of the overworld, it feels almost about as big as Ocarina of Time in many ways.
hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
it feels a lot in terms of the way the how you unlock the world bit by bit, like that or Metroid Prime games. I love for that design. I wish more, other Zelda games, real Zelda games, not Breath of the Wild.
Jesus Christ.
But anyway, I wish more games embrace that over open world. I
Yeah,
appreciate it more.
Same.
it still gives a lot of freedom, but it reins it in to the point where it's not overwhelming. There's not these large gaps of nothing. There's always there's things to do that are in almost every corner and in the middle between those points, and it's condensed. I like it a lot. That's what I'm trying to get to.
It's
I feel like I'm
perfect. It's the
rambling.
perfect size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, Delilah, like it doesn't inundate you with quests. There's like I want to say 15 side quests total in this game. I didn't count them.
Yeah, it's barely any.
It's a reasonable amount, and like they're all interesting in their own way. You come across a spirit where like Thor had killed, I think, his wife, and he wanted you to go destroy the statue of Thor. That was in the one region of Midgard. I kind of forget what it's called already. And you go and destroy that statue and go return to him and let him know. And there's the quest that Brock and Sindri give you, for getting like the whetstone and for getting Evaldi's ring or finding Evaldi.
And then you just find his hand like
Yeah.
sticking out of a ancient. Yeah.
And he winds up becoming an enchantment too after you finish that quest line. Like it's the side quests. There's not many of them, but they're all like kind of meaningful and really interesting.
Yeah, even one of those spirits like turns on you and was like an asshole spirit. I forget the exact story.
There's the
'cause,
one where the spirit wanted you to resurrect Gulvig, and you wind up going to get Gulvig's bones. And once you return the
Yeah.
bones, Gulvig goes to reward you by sending you to your death, and you have
Yep.
to kill Gulvig. And like that's even a good story for Kratos and Atreus, because Atreus wanted to help the spirit because the spirit had insinuated, "Oh, I'll let you talk to your mother again." And Kratos is like, "You can't do that. Like,
Yep.
just don't believe him on that." And then ultimately, when they go back and it betrays them, like Atreus is like, "Go ahead, tell me you told me so." And he's like, "No, take this as a lesson. I will not gloat," or whatever he says.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, just because you mentioned La Fey again, we never actually know why she died. I just thought of that.
Yeah, I don't
Huh?
think we do find out how she passes.
I don't. It's
Well,
interesting.
I thought
Just a
that
thought.
there
I
was the
didn't mean to derail the
war.
conversation, but
The war?
I thought that well, weren't all the giants taking refuge? And I mean, they didn't say specifically how she died, but I just assumed that she died along with all the other giants when Thor was like on a freaking killing rampage.
I mean, I don't, because she was in hiding, so I'm not sure. Um,
like, was she sick?
we never really find, yeah, we never really find out how it happens.
I mean, it's not important, but I find that interesting. Who
Yeah,
knows? Maybe that will be a story point further on. But sorry to
yeah.
derail the conversation. It's just
No,
you mentioned talking to her again, and it just popped into my head.
it's
Like,
fine. It's a good point because she like that's the thing that kicks off the entire story, and we don't really know how it occurs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's worth bringing up for sure.
But going back to a level design, the only place that really felt grindy, and this is only if you're going for a platinum, is Niflheim.
Oh
When
yeah.
you're fucking going through the fog that takes away your health, and you have to open all these chests, which means you have to like grab the souls or whatever the hell they were called. Like I don't know why I'm calling them souls to open up the portals and the chests, and they were like, I mean, I spent hours there. That was the
Yeah.
only place that I was like, fuck this place.
And even Muspelheim,
Yeah.
which was like it was more of like arena challenges one after
Mhm.
another, from what I recall, which like was fun, but it was still like those two realms were unlockable, and there's a reason for that. They're very much side content,
Yeah.
interesting side content, but side content nonetheless.
Yeah.
I actually in my replay I didn't bother with them with either of those realms or the Valkyries. I just didn't.
Yeah.
I did it once and I'm like, yeah, I'm good for now. I don't really want to do
Totally.
this again. I guess that's a good segue. We can talk about the Valkyries real quick. Jason, did you fight any of them?
not this time, but
Okay.
back in my original game, like when we first played the game a few years ago,
Mhm.
I think I did like half of them. I
Okay.
can't remember. Um, I had tried to do all of them. I
If
loved the Valkyrie
if
fights.
I didn't have to do Muspelheim and Niflheim to fight all the Valkyries, I probably would have considered doing it again.
Yeah.
Just because those
Oh,
fights
I didn't
are,
even realize you had to do it. I probably would
yeah.
not have done
So
all of them then.
Yeah.
at
No.
the end of Muspelheim, there's a Valkyrie, and in one of the little nooks in Niflheim, there's a Valkyrie. So you have to go to both
Yeah.
of them in order to fight all the Valkyries. And then there's also there's one in Alfheim, there's one in Helheim, um, and I think all the rest of them are in Midgard. But yeah, I really didn't want to do Muspelheim and Niflheim again for this. They're interesting. They both have their own quirks and hooks, but like
Yeah.
the Valkyries alone are so cool because it's even
Those one-on-one fights are where the combat mechanics really shine.
yes, and yeah, I feel bad I knocked the combat a little bit because I don't like it as much as the older games, but I still really like it. And man, those Valkyrie fights are what are
Yeah.
where it's at. Like
Yeah.
that's where it's at, especially when you're so after you fight all 8 of the Valkyries, you have to fight the Valkyrie Queen,
That
Um,
bitch.
which was such a nerve-wracking fight. Because every Valkyrie has their own fighting style, and she has all of them.
Yeah.
So you're constantly on your toes guessing what attack she's going to use next and how to react to it, and it's just like it's almost like a rhythm game in the sense that you have to anticipate and react
Right.
accordingly. And it's just so fucking phenomenal.
What was this? There was a story beat that came out of that.
That
Like I know Freya
previously-
was the queen of Valkyries, but this Sigrun, it was her name. Or what is it?
Sigrun.
Siegfried?
Siegfried? No, Sigrun.
Did I just say Siegfried? I don't know.
You said
Uh,
Siegfried. Sigrun is the new Valkyrie.
Uh.
Yeah, we find out that Freya used to be Queen of the Valkyries, and
It's late.
I think the whole deal was that they got corrupted somehow, and I think they got corrupted from being in their physical forms for too long, and it kind of led them to go crazy. So they got,
because they're supposed to be like escorting people to Valhalla.
well,
and
they're like they're
that.
like the warriors of Valhalla. And I forget why they were in their physical forms for so long, but I think it led them to go nuts. So they were captured and left trapped in Odin's chambers. And you ultimately come and frankly do them a service by
the lesson
defeating
of
them.
this story, the moral of this entire game is that Odin is an asshole.
Yes, I mean,
Word.
yeah.
Let's go kill him.
I feel like that's the I feel like that's the moral of most mythologies. It's like, yeah, the gods are bad. They're not great.
We
Odin,
can be different, boy.
And Odin especially. Odin is a fucking jerk. Okay. And can we move on? Should we move on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the other things I want to talk about real quick. I do want to talk about the fact that this game is presented as if it's a single cut.
Yeah.
Which is just really cool. I always love when like film does that, and it was really cool to see this game do that. The only like
feels like almost similar like color palette in many ways to like something like The Revenant. Like,
yeah, in the sense that it's like kind of a winter setting. But yeah, I didn't want that to go unmentioned. I personally really like that.
Me too.
And I thought it was well executed in this game. It was also really well executed how they handled fast travel. It's
the world between worlds.
Yeah, and it's not so fast, but it's like well done, and it offers other opportunities for Mimir especially to give you more background to the world, because
it sets up the final execution of the plot, which is really cool as well.
And a lot of
it ties into everything.
Yeah, and a lot of the plot points that I've brought up, like Frigg being Freya's pet name and stuff like that. A lot of those get brought up by going through those fast travel points, going to the realm between realms, and Mimir telling you these stories. There's a lot that the game doesn't just explicitly tell you. You kind of have to go looking for it, and it's not that it's necessary, but it definitely helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to bring those things up.
Right.
Collectibles, we have a lot of collectibles in this game. There's coffins, there's legendary chests that can give you talismans, enchantments, armor pieces, fucking what are they called?
Scrolls.
Well, there's also the legendary chests that have the Muspelheim and Niflheim ciphers for the languages of those realms. I was thinking like I forgot about the realm tears. There were those
you're
too.
Talking about the apples and the horn?
Well,
no, you already said that.
Those are in the Nornir chests.
Yeah.
They got a lot of different collectibles. I kind of thought it was a little bit of overkill.
There's artifacts for like everything. And by the way, just keep in mind, if you haven't played the game yet, why are you here? But I didn't realize this on my initial playthrough. I realized this here, though. You can sell all the artifacts you collect.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like the only way you'll ever have enough money to do shit in the game.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that in my initial playthrough like 2 years ago.
It's funny because there's also a lot of like buckets that are suspended that you can knock down that have hacksilver in them.
Yeah.
There's also I do love with like the normal wooden chests how instead of just like opening the lid,
he just punches it.
punches right through the fucking lid. I do love that. But yeah, there's a lot of different collectibles. The ravens I thought were useless. They weren't really that interesting.
They were
just annoying.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The Jotnar shrines were probably my favorite because they just give you so much information about different giants, and just
Lore.
stories and lore and just interesting things that later lead to you getting more info from Amir. I just really liked those and thought they were cool. And then yeah, what was the other one that I just? Oh, the realm tears were kind of another just like last minute
I forgot
addition.
about them because
Yeah.
Me too.
in the beginning, you're way too underpowered to even try. And then by
Yeah.
the time I was powerful enough, I just like was running past because I just wanted to finish the story.
And like the one realm tear that I do want to bring up is the one that people decoded from the collector's edition map.
Mm.
Do you remember that, Delilah?
I vaguely remember it.
Yeah, like
I know what you're talking about, though.
so. In case Jason, I'm not sure if you know about this.
I vaguely remember there
Yeah,
being like an article about it.
in the collector's edition, you got this cloth map, and around the edge of the cloth map, there's runes, and people translated the runes and found them to be instructions for a puzzle. And I think it's one of the realm towers. I want to say it's the Muspelheim Tower. If you go there and you follow the instructions by looking at structures out like in front of you, you make a realm tear appear and you get a fucking amazing axe pommel from it.
Hmm.
But it's like a hidden realm tear that you would only find if you either found out the instructions online or bought the collector's edition and translated all these runes. And it's just like it's really cool. I wanted to talk about it because I think it's really cool. Yeah, that's kind of all I got other than the final question. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up?
Nah,
Nope.
I think we hit on everything.
I just want to say this was like if my favorite game of all time is The Last of Us. If anyone was like, no, it should be God of War, I'd be like, yo, you're right.
Well,
It's like my
I'll
top 5.
as we're deucing out, I will say that I am going to be giving this game a higher rating than The Last of Us. I do like it better than The Last of Us.
Wow. All right, we'll get to that. But first, I gotta ask the final question.
What's
And
that?
kind of this is like we already kind of talked about this, but I want to reiterate on it and expand on it a little bit. What do you see happening in the next game, and do you think, Jason, you alluded to this probably being a trilogy? I don't think it'll be a trilogy.
Maybe not. I do think Thor will be perhaps more prominent in whatever the next game is.
Well,
I definitely do think one character that from not from the game, he was never actually. I don't think he was ever referenced in the game, but from the mythology is Heimdall. If you remember, he
yeah,
was played by Idris Elba in the Marvel movies, but he's the guy who guards the Bifrost. In the prophecy of Ragnarok, Loki and Heimdall are supposed to kill each other.
yes.
So how, if and how they'll have him play into it, will be interesting. I don't know. It's one of the. I think it was really smart of them to choose Loki, particularly because there are so many different versions of Loki, and because of the nature of Loki himself, they have a lot of latitude to play around with it. And kind of do their own. And now that they've introduced this whole thing of going outside of the Nine Realms with Tyr, like who the fuck knows?
Well, I think
They could introduce like biblical shit or all kinds of mythological shit.
so. I
There
think
could be
that
some kind of go on. I don't know.
I think that's kind of like setting up like yeah that all these mythologies are kind of coexisting, and it kind of helps to give context to how Kratos made his way there from him being from Greece and Greek mythology. I think it kind of leaves it open to whatever happens at the end of this saga with Norse is that it can go to other mythologies, and they kind of have a setup for that. I say I don't think it'll be a trilogy because I think the next one will be the last Norse game. I actually kind of think that if they're going to pick a title, it's going to be God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Right. I think I could see that because it would make more sense. Stretching out Ragnarok over 2 games might be a little much rather than just packing it all into one.
Ooh, what
Especially
if?
especially considering this game is like, when you think about it, the plot is like straight up exposition. Like, it's really just all set up. Now
Yeah.
you have the basis of conflict with Freya, with Thor, with Odin. Like,
Yeah.
What if they call the game God of Wars?
oh shit, you bring in Mars. What if the game is Kratos going and forming an alliance with Mars from Roman pantheon? Got to go and get all the other gods of wars. Got to get what's his name? The god of order from like the Babylonian. I don't remember. There's an epic, the Gilgamesh, I think it is. Got to get all these
I
guys
think that's
together to kill Odin.
Babylonian. Yeah, all right. Anyway,
The epic, whatever. We're
yeah.
Yeah, we're going on and on.
Delilah, where do you see the next game going, or what do you want to see happen?
Well, we know there's like 2 realms that we couldn't visit, right? In the end of the game
Oh, I think
that were
Yes.
locked out. So we're definitely going to
Asgard
be
was
going there.
one.
Yeah.
Asgard, Svartalheim, and was that it?
I think there were just 2 or 3. Yeah. I can't remember the names.
I'm trying to do mental math. So we got Midgard, Alfheim, Jotunheim, technically Helheim, Niflheim, Muspelheim, and was there another? Did I say Helheim already?
Yes.
So I have that means 6. So that means there's
Vanaheim.
Vanaheim. Thank
Yes.
you. All right. So Vanaheim, Svartalheim, and Asgard are not.
I think we
visited.
will definitely go to Vanaheim in the next game because we will be continuing our story with Freya.
And
I think she will break free somehow and be able to go back and rally the Vanir.
I mean, if it's gonna be escalated, if it's gonna be escalated the way it seems like it's gonna be escalated, so that leaves us with Vanaheim, the home of the Vanir gods, and Asgard, the home of the Aesir gods. So, like, yeah, it makes sense to hold those 2 back for when things get escalated to the point that they're now at. So I definitely see that. Svartalheim, I'm not sure. I have to imagine it'll be opened up, but like, for what reason I don't know. That's the home of the
It might be
dwarves
just
of the
an
Dark
extra
Elves.
unlockable in the same way that like Muspelheim was for this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think eventually we're gonna end up in Ragnarok. But I kind of think that it might be a trilogy. I don't think they're gonna kill Kratos in this one. I feel like they might kill him in the third, because I feel like we're all expecting it at this point.
And I also feel like at some point, like Sony Santa Monica is gonna want to do something else.
So
Yeah.
do you guys think that we'll be playing as Atreus in the next game?
No,
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think eventually, like maybe halfway through.
They might have like a gameplay segment similar to like,
The Last of
Miles.
Us, or
like The Last
Spider-Man
of Us.
even had, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I honestly wouldn't want to. Not because I don't like Atreus, but because I don't think the gameplay would be as interesting.
It would be a drastically different setup because you wouldn't be. He's using his bow, his different arrow types,
It's magic. Yeah,
summoning.
it's magic.
Yeah, it's much more magic focused. Not that Kratos doesn't have a history with using magic abilities; he does, but that's never been the focus of his combat. So for this to be such a drastic change, I feel like that would alienate the player base significantly more than moving from classic God of War to
wouldn't be as
God of War.
visceral.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens.
The only one person that we can play as that would feel somewhat similar to Kratos is, I think, Thor.
Laufey. Or Laufey. If somehow Laufey were to come back.
I mean, gods have come back. It's not out of the realm of possibilities.
I guess see what you did there.
All right. We good to wrap this up?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah, Jason,
Yep.
lay it on me.
Oh yeah, my score.
What score are you giving
So
God of
it's,
War 2018?
I am giving God of War 2018 an 8.9 mistletoes.
Nice.
That is fuck it. I'm gonna give it 9 mistletoes.
Oh shit!
So that
9.
is my first 9 ever.
Yeah.
That's also my highest rating I've ever given on this show.
I think so.
Second highest being Last of Us at 8.7.
Yeah.
Did you
I do.
ever rate Metal Gear Solid 2? We didn't do ratings back
shit.
then.
I don't remember. I
Alright.
have to go back and listen
We're
because I
gonna
might
have
have.
to go back and listen.
Metal
Retroactively
Gear-
put a score on that bad boy.
Oh fuck!
Because it's been like a later thing that we've done the Kwasnicki scores, so
Yeah.
maybe we
I
weren't.
gotta do my homework. But yeah, I do love this game.
Look forward to go ahead.
All I was gonna say was, and I fucking love the track "Memory of Mothers." It's that motif of LaFay's theme that plays throughout the game. It's fucking fantastic.
Look forward to our bonus episode later this year of us going through all of Jason's Kwasnicki scores and giving
How hypocritical I am.
giving our scores of the Kwasnicki scores. All right, Delaila, what you got to plug? You're the
I'm just
busiest
playing
out of all
Marvel's
of us.
Avengers. Honestly, just playing Marvel's Avengers on YouTube, Facebook Gaming, and Twitch. Assassina San, either with an underscore or dash. Usually stream Sundays at 9:30, but right now I'm doing a full playthrough for the main campaign that is released pretty much daily. And yeah, I did like an hour-long discussion with my friend Ryan that I mentioned in this episode about her analysis of Norse mythology with God of War in preparation for this episode. So I definitely want to link that to this episode because I thought she had a lot of good things to say.
I'll throw it in the description somewhere.
Yeah, or on like a card or something.
Yeah, I got to figure out how YouTube works.
I can do it. Yeah,
Okay.
I can do it. It's fine.
Okay.
And also,
Okay, yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Nibelheimian. You can find Delaila on Twitter at Assassina_San. You can find Jason on Twitter at SolidQuaz, but don't follow him. He's got nothing to say.
There's no point. I don't post anything. I haven't been on Twitter since like Twitter was invented. I'm ancient. I'm a giant. I just retreated back into my lair.
If you liked this episode, if you're listening to it on podcast services, especially if you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts, please, I'm begging you with all my heart, please leave a review and rating, 5 stars preferred. Tell us what you like about the show. Tell us what you don't like about the show. Give us suggestions on games you want us to cover. Like, there's months where we're clamoring trying to find a game that we all want to play and talk about. So if there's something you want to hear, let us know. If you're watching this on YouTube, put that in the comments, like the show, share the show, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, share it with your pets, share it with your parents. Don't share it with your kids unless they're of age to listen to the fuck words a lot, because we curse a lot. Yeah, all feedback is appreciated, and we do the show for you guys. It's only half for us. It's all for you guys. So
yes.
Yeah.
Do it for you.
So keep coming back. And if you want to keep coming back, well, guess what? This episode's going up in September, which means next month is my favorite month to do episodes
Spooky month.
on. Because
Best month ever.
we're doing fucking horror game. We're doing a fucking horror game next month. And Jason, what game are we doing for the next episode?
Oh my god, I am so excited for this. One of my favorite franchises, Alien Isolation.
Yeah, we're doing Alien Isolation. This is going to come with a bit of extra homework. I've played this game before. I'm playing again. I'm loving playing it again. It's so scary. It's so terrifying. It's very, very contingent on knowing and having an appreciation for the original first film of Alien. So I'm going to give you guys homework, and any listeners that are going to come back for that episode and you're going to play the game, go watch Alien, either before or after you play through the game. I don't really care. I would say before.
I've got
probably
multiple cuts of both Aliens.
Oh, so do I.
First two. So,
so
don't come at me, bro. I've got the Blu-ray collection of all the Blade Runner cuts. Come at me.
Oh God, Blade Runner gives me a fucking headache. All right. Yeah. Watch Alien, play Alien Isolation, and we'll see you
like
next...
tears in the rain.
We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Jason?
I thought we were just cutting it there, but
No.
Okay. Like tears in the rain. Bye-bye, folks.
Call me